How does an institution we're all meant to trust just break? We're going to dive into what happens when the very systems designed to protect us begin to crumble from the inside out. We're looking at the case of Victoria Police, and this, right here, is the anatomy of a systemic collapse.
So before we get into the how and the why, we've got to look at the symptoms. The really clear, flashing red lights that showed this entire system was under an incredible amount of stress.
So, that's the big question, isn't it? How does a system actually break? Well, we can start to piece it together by looking at three absolutely shocking numbers. Each one tells a part of the story about the crisis in trust, in safety, and in its own internal stability. First up, public trust. And wow, this is a big one. Back in 2017, a solid 76% of Victorians felt the police had high or very high ethics. Fast forward just 3 years, and that number craters to 42%. That's not a dip, that is a catastrophic collapse in confidence. Okay, so trust is in the gutter. What about safety on the streets? Well, in the 2022-23 financial year, Victoria saw this many criminal offenses, the highest number ever recorded. Now look, crime is complicated, for sure, but this spike happened at the exact same time the police force was at its absolute weakest.
And the problem wasn't just external. By 2024, if you took the nearly 800 unfilled jobs and added another 750 officers out on long-term sick leave, you get this staggering figure. Roughly 1 in every 5 police officer roles was effectively empty. The front line was just hollowed out.
So you see the symptoms, right? How in the world did it get this bad? Well, to really understand the collapse, you have to trace it all the way back to the source, a complete and total breakdown in accountability.
And this timeline just lays it all out. This wasn't one bad day or one single event. It was a decade-long pattern of decay. You had brutality at Ballarat Station, the explosive Lawyer X revelations, controversial COVID enforcement. Each incident just chipped away at the force's integrity, creating this culture where it felt like misconduct had no real consequences.
But of all of them, the Lawyer X scandal was the one that just rocked the entire system. Police were secretly using a criminal defense lawyer as a snitch against her own clients. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Australia's High Court called it reprehensible and said it corrupted the very core of the justice system.
And, this quote, taken from a poll of just regular people during that time, it says it all, doesn't it? It wasn't just about one scandal anymore. It was this feeling that the police themselves weren't playing by the same rules as everyone else.
So what happens when there's no real accountability from the outside? Well, that rot starts to spread inside the organization. The problem literally began to eat itself from within.
And get this isn't from critics, this is from the force's own data. By 2023, almost a third of officers said they'd witnessed bullying. Favoritism was seen as a huge problem, and an incredible 2/3 of officers, 2/3, reported feeling burnt out. So you have all this burnout and this toxic culture. What happens next? People head for the exits. In 2023, a survey found that 1 in 5 officers, 1 in 5, was actively planning to quit within a year. These are good, experienced people just looking for a way out. Now, this internal decay wasn't just some HR problem you can file away. It had a direct, tangible effect on the force's ability to do its most basic job, and that led to a critical collapse right on the front line. And here's what that looks like in stark numbers. You combine over 800 empty positions with another 750 officers out long-term, many with psychological injuries, and you've punched a massive hole in the force. This means fewer cops on the street and slower response times, plain and simple. And the cost of that? It's just devastating. You're hearing reports of sexual assault investigations taking up to 3 years. Proactive patrols, the kind that prevent crime, they're cut back. Justice isn't just delayed. For many, it's denied. Not because officers don't care, but because there just aren't enough of them. Okay, so let's connect all these dots. We're about to see how these different crises, accountability, culture, and capability, weren't just happening at the same time. They were feeding each other, creating this dangerous, self-reinforcing loop.
This right here, this is the engine of the entire collapse. It's a vicious cycle. It all starts with misconduct going unchecked. That poisons the internal culture, right? Which then drives good officers to quit. A smaller, burnt-out force is obviously less effective, which leads to rising crime and falling public trust. And when trust is gone, it becomes even harder to hold anyone accountable, which brings you right back to the start of the loop.
So if you're stuck in a nightmare loop like that, how on earth do you break out of it? Well, reformers are arguing that the answer isn't just more rules or more bodies. It's about fundamentally redesigning the whole concept of power itself.
And the solution, they say, is this incredibly powerful idea, the custody of power. It totally reframes what policing is. Power isn't a right to be wielded. It's a trust. It's something you hold protectively on behalf of the public. It is conditional. It has to be witnessed. And, most importantly, if that trust is broken, it can be taken away.
And that brings us to this one final, absolutely crucial question. If the power to police is really just a trust that's been loaned by the people, then who is ultimately responsible for holding that trust to account? It's a question every single community has to answer, to make sure that the people who are empowered to protect truly serve the public first.